This Canadian man enters the Fortis hospital in India with intense vomiting, diarrhea, and then hours later, he was dead. The next day, his body is on his way back to Canada. Local authorities saw nothing suspicious. Instead, they labeled the death as an acute case of gastroenteritis and intestinal perforation. But the moment this man died, he took hundreds of millions of dollars with him.
Thousands of clients have millions of dollars in frozen assets.
And along with his death, the problem here is also access to his laptop.
Yeah, I pretty much ended up losing my life savings because of it.
His death sparked authorities in the US and Canada to scramble to find these millions of dollars. And what they discovered blew everyone away. Now the world is obsessed over his death. Hundreds of digital detectives want answers to these thousands of questions, but one stands out above all the rest. What if he isn't dead? Let's talk about Quadriga in today's episode of Company Forensics.
So, Gerald, what's your story? You were born, now you're here. What happened in between?
Gerald Cotten followed a typical Bitcoin millionaire type of persona. He was this nerdy introvert who had made it big with crypto. But you wouldn't have guessed he was a trailblazer in the Canadian cryptocurrency exchange market. His company, Quadriga Fintech Solutions, ran the Quadriga Exchange, had become one of the biggest in Canada. As Bitcoin surged, Cotten's fortune increased. And he was living in luxury. He had yachts and a Cessna that many call the Cadillac of the skies. Cotten and his wife, Jennifer Robertson, traveled the world and lived the good life. He also donated some of his money and time to causes, and that's how he landed in India. Part of his mission was to attempt the opening of an orphanage where he had donated $11,000 for supplies. Now, the couple landed in New Delhi on November 30th, 2018. And first, they went to the Taj Mahal and some landmarks in India, and then on December 8th, they landed in Jaipur and made their way to the Oberoi Hotel, one of the most luxurious hotels in that part of India. Now, this place is like a dream destination, but for them, it turned into a nightmare in a matter of hours. As the evening progressed, Cotten began complaining about stomach cramps. He had long suffered from Crohn's disease, but the discomfort wouldn't subside this time. An ambulance rushed him through the streets of Jaipur to the private Fortis hospital. And there, things only got worse. The severe case of gastroenteritis showed signs of possible perforation. Staff rushed to move him to the ICU, but failed to stabilize him. And at 2:45 p.m. on December 9th, he went into a cardiac arrest. Though the doctors managed to revive him, he flatlined 2 more times. And finally, at 7:26 p.m. on December 9th, Gerald Cotten passed away. The hospital staff listed his cause of death as a cardiac arrest due to that perforation. And there was no report of anything unusual, though it's rare for people to die from Crohn's disease. 2 days later, on December 11th, Jennifer Robertson and the body of her deceased husband arrived back in Canada. And the coroner signed a death certificate, and Cotten was dead, but more than $200 million had vanished. Now, the money did not belong to him in the first place. Instead, more than 70,000 people had trusted his exchange with their money. Now, the money was, of course, stuck in crypto wallets somewhere in the blockchain. Cotten's death left authorities and crypto experts scrambling to find the money. But to the outside world, Cotten didn't look like a thief. Well, looks can be deceiving. Gerald Cotten grew up in a small town in Belleville, Ontario, and loved computers and the internet. So there's nothing strange except that he participated in scams since he was 15. In 2003, he arrived at the website Talk Gold. And this was a haven of high-yield investment programs that promised ultra-high returns with little to no work. Now, these high-yield investment programs are more often than not scams. They balance taking people's money and keeping up a lie that maintains their trust. And this world lured him in, and there was no turning back from this. Under the username Scepter, he became one of the most active users. In January 2004, he had already created his first investment program, SNS Investments, and the promises were worthy of a teenager. All I will say is that we will generate your return and that we're not what is called a Ponzi or a pyramid scheme. In months, he had hundreds of unsuspecting investors. But he, of course, had no money and no investment plan. So now they were chasing him, and he felt the heat. If a threat of any kind is made, you are stating that you do not wish to receive a refund and you will not receive one. And at one point, Scepter owed money to 235 investors, and he never paid it back. By May of 2004, SNS Investments had disappeared, and so had this Scepter persona. And that's when Lucky Invest appeared. And Cotten made one crucial mistake here. Once, he answered a question for Scepter under his own username. And this little mistake earned him this reputation in this shady world. So he went into stealth mode and his companies completely disappeared from the earth. So while Cotten lived in and out of the world of scams and Ponzi schemes, another player in our story also made headlines. That's Omar Damani. Omar Damani ran a platform called Shadow Crew, which was an online marketplace for stolen credit cards. And in 2005, a court found him guilty and sentenced him to 18 months in jail. But this would not slow him down. So in 2012, the mysterious Quadriga fund was born, and it promised great returns. The name comes from the four-horse carriage of ancient Rome, who were the founding investors. And the thing is that nobody knew who they were. Around this time, Gerald Cotten moved to Vancouver, which is a city that was becoming this new crypto hub, so it seemed like the perfect destination for someone like him. Cotten even became the director of the Vancouver Bitcoin Co-op, and his nerdy personality was very helpful. After all, he just seemed harmless. With a big smile and an ability to explain, he lured more and more people into Bitcoin. At the same time, nearing 2013, Cotten and a business partner incorporated Quadriga CX. Now, this wasn't the same as the Quadriga fund, which has still operated but had no activity. And this Quadriga CX got off to a great start in 2013. It was the cheapest, the fastest, and the safest in the country. It was the first exchange to hold a license from the Canada's Anti-Money Laundering Authority. So while Quadriga CX rose to the top in no time, the Quadriga fund disappeared in silence. There's no evidence still on why. And there's also no clear indicator of who ran it or who even created it. But let's face it, having the same name is too much of a coincidence, and it wasn't the only one. Now, new character in this story. This is Michael Patron. He had earned a reputation as the go-to person in fintech. At least that's what some articles read. Plus, he taught Thai kickboxing, he was a personal trainer, he was an MMA fighter, and he had a master's degree in social psychology from the University of California. Or, well, that's just what he says. Anyway, he was also active in Talk Gold, and that's where he met Cotten, and the two would become friends. Who knew that such a place of fraud could form such strong bonds? Plus, their friendship took them to some interesting places. For example, Liberty Reserve was this new digital currency that was gaining strength after it began in 2007. It had no anti-money laundering policies or verified information, so in short, it had all the excellent markings to be a scam. As the years passed, Liberty Reserve grew. It was massive. More than 78 million transactions totaling more than $8 billion. And people couldn't send their funds directly to buy and sell Liberty Reserve. Instead, they had to use exchanges which charged fees for these transactions. So authorities, of course, grew suspicious and pounced on the company as well as on those exchanges. And what they found is more than 30 exchanges where people sent their money to buy this digital currency. Amongst them was one exchange called Midas Gold Account. And this one had seen more than $5.2 million flow through it on its way to Liberty Reserve. Now, the owner of the Midas Gold account was Mr. Patron, but not Michael Patron, Omar Patron. And the email with which he had registered the account was geraldcotten@gmail.com. Now, Omar Patron isn't Michael Patron's brother. They are, of course, the same person, and this isn't even their original name. His name is Omar Damani, who would create Quadriga CX with a business partner, Gerald Cotten. Quadriga CX had a lot of advantages. It had speed and cost, but it also benefited from a series of events. Back in 2014, there were a few major crypto exchanges in the world, and those that had made it big were in fact massive exchanges. But as big as they weren't immune to hacking. So in 1 year, some of the most important funds in the world had to shut down, paving the way for Quadriga to become this big name that they were. Plus, Cotten was making a name for himself in the crypto world. He appeared in podcasts and articles, and some even went candid. In one, he revealed that he kept passwords in pen and paper, which would later create an entire myth around him. And then there was, of course, the way he handled business. One of his goals was to take Quadriga public right when Bitcoin's value rose. And at the time, it kind of made sense. So yes, things seemed optimistic for Quadriga, but there was a problem, and it was Quadriga itself. Before I go on the story, I want to thank our sponsor for today, which is ChartMogul. ChartMogul is the platform that we actually use on Slidebean to track all of our SaaS subscription analytics, our MRR, our ARR, our churn, and it's the platform that you need to run your business like a pro. You can use ChartMogul to measure, to understand, and to grow your recurring revenue. Signing up is completely free if you have under $10,000 in MRR. Completely free. And if you have more than that, you can use the code Slidebean at checkout to get $600 off through your first year. Thanks a lot to the ChartMogul team for sponsoring today's video. Quadriga not only failed to go public, but by June 2015, it had no cash. Plus, it had lost 45% of its market share. Desperate to see their investment pay off, investors put in $600,000 of additional capital, including $200,000 directly from Patreon. But it was to no avail. It was a sinking ship. By early 2016, the entire board in Quadriga had quit, including Patreon, but it still handled a lot of money. So just like that, Cotten was kind of left alone, in charge of a crypto exchange that was so big that the Canadian government grew suspicious, and the central bank issued a cease trade. The cease trade ended right when Bitcoin was becoming more valuable, so the exchange saw around $2 billion in transactions, and it profited from every single one of them. This was at the time where more and more people wanted in on Bitcoin, so for Cotten, things were playing great. But what the world didn't know was that Quadriga was nothing more than Cotten and his laptop, for better or worse. 3 days before Gerald Cotten and Jennifer Robertson arrived in India, he signed a will. The date was November 27th, 2018. Cotten left everything, $100,000 Canadian, for their 2 chihuahuas, and he made Robertson the owner of his every possession should he die. Is this common practice? Yes, some people have signed wills before traveling, but there is nothing of concern for Cotten. And then again, they traveled to India, where we know what happened. Or do we? On December 10th, one day after Cotten died, the Fortis hospital asked for a no objection certificate. This states that there was no foul play in his death. And then the hotel rushed to have the body embalmed, but the first professional rejected it as it came from a hotel and not from a hospital or from the police. So they rushed to a university hospital where a junior embalmer did the job. And that same day, Jennifer Robertson checked out of the hotel at 3:30 p.m. She paid for the remaining days and flew to New Delhi. So by the 11th, she was already landing in Canada with the embalmed body. On the 12th, a Canadian death certificate showed that Cotten died in India on the 9th. But the death certificate from India actually tells a different story. First of all, it wasn't until the 13th that the local authority emitted the certificate. And yes, I know that typos exist, but in a death certificate, this document is vital, and it can't fathom how nobody noticed this little mistake. And then on the 14th, Jennifer Robertson called the local manager to help her sell Cotten's fancy private plane. She explained that her husband had died and that she didn't need the Cessna for herself. The same happened for the yacht. As for Quadriga, the company actually waited until January 14th, 2019 to announce that Cotten had died. And immediately afterwards, the website went into maintenance. Of course, the moment the news came out, people rushed to withdraw their funds, but they just couldn't. With the site down and with no more communication from Robertson, people just got left in the dark. By January 31st, Quadriga filed for creditor protection, and the case escalated to higher authorities. This means that the person in charge of everything has to sign an affidavit where they swear by certain conditions, and that was Jennifer Robertson. The money was the most important thing, and she said that she had no idea where the passwords for any of the cold wallets were. She did say there was a dead man's switch that would send cold wallet passwords to her and to others in charge, but the email never came, and that email was the only path to finding, again, more than $200 million that had gone missing. Quadriga CX had more than $200 million in its name because Bitcoin was on the rise, and Cotten had made a name for himself, but the platform was shaky at best. In June 2017, the platform failed to verify a smart contract, and it lost $14 million in crypto. And it wasn't the only problem they had. The platform had no proper accounting system. Instead, it used third-party software to make payments and had no adequate tracking. So for example, when $67 million came in December 2017, Canada's central bank took notice. It investigated and it could not track the money back to its owners. So it actually ended up seizing $25 million and freezing close to 400 users. Cotten's name, of course, took a hit. Even his relatives were having trouble with banks in Canada. And things were about to get much worse. Users rushed to withdraw their funds from Quadriga, but the system was so flawed that it was just impossible. In fact, it all seemed perfectly flawed. Scams work at first. The high-yield investment program scheme pays some people off to maintain their reputation, and then it collapses, blaming something like the unpredictability of the investment world. As the Bitcoin price was collapsing, more and more users were desperate to remove their money from the exchange, and they just ran into this brick wall. A user even sued Quadriga for failing to pay back $137,000, but Quadriga, of course, never answered back. Right at this time, Cotten's life was also taking a toll. He grew secluded, he stopped stopped seeing friends and family, and he made fewer media appearances. By November 18, he called the local airport to say that he couldn't pay the lease on the plane. So if at this time the Quadriga exchange would have collapsed due to reasons, it would have made perfect sense. After all, it had all the signs of a high-yield investment program. But that's the thing. It didn't collapse. Canadian authorities assigned Ernst & Young as a monitor while Quadriga sorted everything out. What EY found made things even more complicated. Outside analysis found no evidence that these cold wallets existed at all. Moreover, they weren't convinced that there weren't enough activity to show their presence. So another question came up, which was, where had the funds gone? Were they stuck or were they just missing altogether? And then on January 26th, almost 2 weeks after entering maintenance, Quadriga was still accepting deposits. It only went offline 2 days after the last transfer, which was 3 days after Cotten died. And then the weird facts keep piling on top of each other. On February 6th, for example, Quadriga sent $350,000 to a cold wallet by accident. It's a cold wallet that no one can access. And it of course reminded me of Cotten's mistake back with Lucky Invest and with SS. EY did find some of these cold wallets, but they had been empty since April 2018. So that's how one man's death enthralled the entire world. The media, of course, ended up loving the case. Patreon took a beating, his dark past came out, but he claimed everything happened after he left. And in fact, he, of course, blamed Cotten for struggling to find work. Journalists flew worldwide to find Cotten. When they landed in India, the authorities saw no harm done. To them, Cotten was just another death in that hospital. But there was the will and the death certificate with the errors. And when word got out in Canada, local contractors rushed to the couple's former home to find a safe or anything where the passwords might be. And they, of course, found nothing. Authorities discovered that Cotten had used aliases to transfer funds from Quadriga to other exchanges. And these funds included 76,000 users. The case was confusing enough for people even to ask for an exhumation of Cotten's body for DNA testing. And honestly, that's something that we might need to see, because Quadriga is the best example of a Ponzi scheme played out to the highest level. As for Robertson, after signing off on Quadriga's assets, she got $90,000, the wedding ring, and the Jeep. That's it. She ended up publishing a book where she tries to clear her name and ends up doing a terrible job. She insists that she knew nothing of her husband's work, but that's a far claim. Granted, she's trying to rebuild her life, but maybe so is Cotten, if he's out there. What do you think?